Welcome back to another great episode of Krusty Car News. Let's get into the first topic. Car repossessions are spiking. What's going on? The second story, that car you're driving, what if that car manufacturer goes out of business? What do you do next? The third story is we're wondering, with all these high prices, why are car makers not making affordable cars? The fourth story, Stellantis, and there's proof that they finally collapsed. Jeep, Ram, Dodge, and even Chrysler are going down the toilet. And the fifth story is a great one to cap off. We're going to offer the single biggest reason for these extraordinarily high car prices. So on that note, grab your bag of popcorn, sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. Let's get into it now.
Life's too short to drive boring cars.
The first story, as I promised you, breaking news. Car repossessions are absolutely on the rise.
Here we have another repossession, not looked after all that well. Here's a little used Subaru. Here we have a slightly used A8. This is a repossession, as is this Mitsubishi Evo Lancer. This Jeep Grand Cherokee, here's a repossession. It's rode hard, put away wet.
Car repossessions are up 23%.
What's going on in the industry? Yeah, we're seeing people with amazing credit scores even getting their vehicles taken away. We're seeing record numbers, percentage of 6, 7, 8% of all car loans are getting repossessed. And that's people with subprime credit scores. But even the prime buyers are finding themselves defaulting on a lot of their car loans.
The cost of living crisis is real. People having to live under bridges, live under scaffolding, in their vehicles parked on the side of the road. And the fact that we're seeing repossessions on an all-time high just are indications of the cost of living crisis.
Why? Extraordinarily high costs, as well as the extensively long loan terms. People are taking car loans out as long as 7, 8 years.
The average monthly new vehicle payment hitting an all-time high of $730, many boosted by rising interest rates.
And we're starting to see this. Why? We've seen food prices skyrocket 2, 3, 4 times what they were a few short years ago. We've even seen housing prices go up dramatically. We're seeing housing costs at least double or triple in the larger cities in Canada, Vancouver and Toronto, while every other city across North America, including the States, has continued to climb as well and escalate, separating the difference between those that have and those that don't. And everybody knows housing's gone up, food's gone up, but cars, and that's the essential way for people to get around, to get to the jobs that they pay for all these things. But the cost of vehicles has gone up 20, 30, 40, even 50%, and in some cases a lot more than it was even 5 short years ago. For example, here's a great candidate right here. Let's take a look. We have a Dodge Dually 4x4 as we see, and of course this is a limited, very large and in charge. You get this great little decal right there. Of course, you can tow a lot with this. This is a Dually 1 ton, clearly. The deep wheels, the big flares, and of course, this is a great looking unit. Big mirrors, and this is the 3500 HD, but these don't come at a cheap price tag. Let's take a quick look and see how much. Well, right here, night edition vehicle, 4x4, lots of different options. As you can see, you do have sunroof up in there, the bigger screen. This is a beautiful truck, but the price, $121,000. It's 121 grand. That is a significant amount of money. Oh, and here's another beauty right here. These are one of the higher cost vehicles you'll find in a lot of the Jeep products. And we're looking at a Rubicon here, and this is a 4xe, which means when you see the blue hooks there, that means it's electrified. Yes, it's a beautiful unit. Plug in there, lots of blue decals all over the place. 4 doors, you got the painted roof, of course even the painted flares here. Beautiful vehicle, more blue hooks, and this oversized wheel on the back. Definitely love the looks of this vehicle around here, and as you can see, lots of great painted parts, and it's just a beautiful unit. But how much does this unit cost? Well, how about $85,655 there? $85,000. And right here we have a whole row of vehicles, as you can see. I call this upside down alley because these are examples of vehicles that people bought back at the peak 2022, when we saw prices at their all-time highs, interest rates start to spike up, and we saw people that were paying way over sticker because they did not want to wait.
Most of the stuff out here is repossessed.
There was this alleged shortage on chips and materials and vehicles, and people were often paying a lot more than MSRP on a lot of vehicles. It didn't matter if you were talking trucks, cars, SUVs, people were paying more, way more than they should have. And because people were often paying a lot more than they should, now after we skip out a year or two, all of a sudden we look at a scenario of naturally depreciation. Vehicles now start to dive back in, slot back into their natural depreciation curve. The problem is they all bought and they borrowed money at that top peak dollar, and now they're in a place where if they want to trade it in, sell it, even look at their sheer equity of that vehicle, they often have $25,000 to pay on a vehicle that's only worth $17,200 as example. And this is clearly what's happening right now is people have overpaid. They're now in a negative equity situation. They have to keep paying or they're going to lose. From where I stand, the price of any one of these pickup trucks, and this doesn't matter if we're talking Dodge, Ford, Ram, Toyota, Honda, Nissan, or even some of the luxury brands, Range Rover, BMW, Audi. A lot of those are even less incentivized. So all cars, SUVs, and trucks are highly priced these days, making the cost of living crisis even more aggressive when we know this is the second largest investment in your life is your cars, your trucks, your vehicle, your transportation. Everybody in most countries, I know Canada, United States, need a form of transportation, get from city to city, town to town, because we're not so congested. We're spread out, and therefore you usually need a vehicle. And here's another great example, a 3500 HD Cummins turbo diesel, but this is basically a tradesman right here. This is nothing more than the most basic of basic 1-ton diesel pickup trucks. Yes, you do get 4x4, and you do get the standard size box here. You got nice chrome. You notice plastic, of course, very basic there. Basic handles, very simplistic, and lots of simple parts in this vehicle. But this tradesman crew 4x4 is going for $89,000. 89 grand right there, 89,000 bucks. More examples of how expensive these vehicles have gotten. I remember probably 10 years ago, you can get yourself a nicely equipped diesel pickup truck for about $60,000. At this point, nobody seems to be getting any deals soon. So that just continues on the hurt for those people that can't afford it. And while yes, there's a segment of the market of people that are doing well. There's people that own big business. There's people that have found niches and have capitalized during this tough time. The fact remains is the vast majority of the economy and the middle class find continued struggles in trying to make their payments for their car, their van, their SUV, their pickup truck, and then to insult to injury, the price of a lot of these vehicles just keeps going up and up and up.
And as it stands, many people clearly just aren't getting the message about how to avoid car repossessions. For example, paying cash, borrowing a smaller amount of money for your car loan, buying a cheaper car, or even fixing what you've got and avoiding borrowing money altogether are all great tips in avoiding getting your car repossessed, because that hurts your credit score, that hurts your pride, and certainly we all like to avoid the stress. The second story, what happens if the car that you're driving, that company goes out of business? That's right, they go bankrupt. Well, we look around. Fisker struggled. They couldn't quite get off the ground. That's one example of a car manufacturer that went out of business in short order. They just couldn't get the money together, reliability concerns, and now they're out of business. And Ford, ups and downs, the struggles are real. The ICE vehicles and the conventional old school manufacturers are struggling with sales these days as the transformation to EVs is well underway. This puts a lot of non-competitive brands at the risk of going out of business. This is actually happening every single day. We're seeing manufacturers like Volkswagen on the verge and on the brink, Stellantis barely hanging on by a thread. Then remember Pontiac, remember Saturn, and remember a whole pile of different manufacturers that have come and gone throughout the years. Any brand that isn't flexible enough, innovative enough, or has the financial sense to manage their business is all at risk. This is a very volatile market. While margins for brand new sales is somewhat variable. While they've come from a place of volume sales where almost little dollars are made on the transaction of any particular brand new vehicle, the fact is they're trying to transform into a market now where they're selling less vehicles but at a much higher margin. But that puts everybody at risk. All it takes is a bad marketing decision, and poor sales for 4 consecutive quarters is all it might take to shut down many of these businesses. It hasn't just happened, it continues to happen, and it will happen some more. So what happens to your car if in fact your car's builder is one of those manufacturers that can't hold on for dear life and actually goes out of business? Once these companies file for Chapter 11 or file for bankruptcy, that sort of protects them from any further litigation generally. And so if it's a company that didn't have a lot of assets, didn't have a lot of resources, it's like trying to drain blood from a stone. There's no such thing. Fisker owners were trying to scramble to get software updates, components, but even once push come to shove and you're looking for battery changes or service supply and support, good luck. And that's where a lot of people are snookered. So if you happen to have a car or a vehicle that is coming from a car company that goes under, sadly, little recourse is even available. And so for any of these car companies that file for Chapter 11 or go bankrupt, like in my opinion and many opinion, there are certainly some car companies today that have been around a long time that are risking riding the bankruptcy line. And so any car manufacturer today is at a huge risk of going out of business. With this transition to electrification means that nobody's clear from that risk. Think about even on the most simplest of terms. You happen to lose your key fob for your car, and it happens to be one of those car manufacturers that goes out of business. Where do you think that leaves you? Up the creek. Because even with these rolling computers nowadays, which every single car manufacturer is far more complicated than they've ever been before, there's a huge risk that this could literally incapacitate your vehicle. If you can't get a replacement fob for one that you lost in the snow somewhere, there's a high possibility that that vehicle is rendered a big lump of coal. It's truly hard to know if the car that you're driving is supported by a manufacturer that doesn't have their financial act together, and it's almost impossible to predict the future. But what you can predict is do your best shopping. Look around when you're buying your next car. Make sure they've got a reputable reputation for durability. They've been around a long time. Their financial stocks look good. And this manufacturer has a great vision for the future. They're on board with innovation and they look like they have the act together. That's when you're buying into a brand that's likely going to have it together. And then, hopefully, you'll never have your car built by a manufacturer that's going out of business. The third story is something we've all been asking. Why don't car manufacturers make affordable cars? Profits are really what's driving a lot of these car manufacturers to create these very expensive vehicles. We're seeing the average transaction price bump back up again. We're up close to $48,000 and change. It won't be long before we're $50K. And yet we've seen some improvements over the last number of months. That's really only because of strong incentives, all kinds of discounts, rates off, all kinds of things to get people in the door. And while they applied some of these discounts, we're seeing prices that we're edging down, slowing down, and there was this feeling and this sentiment that prices were dropping. But they never were dropping. Why is it that simply 5 years ago, you could find yourself a base entry-level car for $16,000 and now you can't even get a sniff at under $30,000? Where do these prices gone? That doesn't even come close to aligning with inflation. I mean, if you look at the base foundational pricing of a lot of these vehicle manufacturers, for example, the MSRP, a lot of that is going up. It doesn't matter what the end user sees. It doesn't matter you go online and you're able to get some special deal and they're giving you $2,500 off. Those are all smoke and mirrors because behind the scenes, they're raising the bar. And while we think this is great, oh, we're getting $5,000 off, the reality is we're seeing this escalating rates, but we're seeing rates that far overcome what we're seeing the cost of living increases. You know, inflationary rates, 3, 4, 5% year over year. We're not seeing that with the automotive sector. We're seeing much higher numbers. Ford had their lower costs. You think vehicles like the Focus and some of these lower cost vehicles, you know, even Toyota and Honda had their small price point vehicles too. But the point is to put those to market in a vehicle that might only net them $1,500, $2,000 on a transaction, but we're putting the same equipment, that same electronics, the chips, to get those vehicles out to market. They quickly realize that, well, wait a minute, if we put that chip over in this other vehicle that's a more premium model, then what we're able to get is a much more bigger margin. Instead of that $1,500 or $2,000 net profit, maybe we can get $8,000, $10,000, $15,000 out of that vehicle and just produce maybe a few less of those vehicles, but we can ration these chips. They allege that they're saying they're losing tens of thousands of dollars on the creation of every one of their electric vehicles. Okay, so how do they make that up? Well, they make it up on the sales of their internal combustion engine vehicles. And while we're transitioning that to the EV marketplace, all of these manufacturers continue doing the same thing, whether it's Ford, Stellantis, General Motors, are all losing money, allegedly, creating a lot of these electric vehicles. As their pricing went up in the last 5 years by 60%, it was an inversely proportional drop in the number of sales. They've gone from something like 1 million Jeeps down to 600,000 Jeeps in a few years. That's brutal sales. Absolutely devastating. It's quite clear they don't have to sell the numbers anymore. They're no longer looking for volumes. They're certainly looking for margin of profit on the sales of each individual vehicle. And they also don't have to worry about selling that price point car. As long as they've got enough buyers, they're going to continue selling these high price point vehicles that are highly tricked out with features and options and loaded with technology. Translation, very expensive cars aren't going away anytime soon. The fourth story. Further proof Stellantis has finally collapsed.
Stellantis endured a bumpy ride in the third quarter as revenue fell 27%.
There's Rams, Rams, and yet even more Rams. All the way to the end of the road, this parking lot is absolutely full. Look, even the Jeeps are parking in the ditch next to the train tracks because there's so much inventory.
Stellantis laying off 1,100 workers at its Toledo Jeep Assembly Complex due to sagging sales.
Lots are absolutely filling up with Jeeps, Rams, Chryslers of every product line, and lots are filling. And this isn't just 2025s. There's 24s, 23s, and there's even a few 22s out here. We're seeing all kinds of inventory piling up, not just existing 2025s because we know they're coming fresh off the truck, but unfortunately there's 23s and 24s on the lot, and even 2024 model years. Like this little Ram Classic right here with a 5.7 Hemi has been sitting here for quite some time, and clearly nobody is looking at buying this truck as well. Oh, look over there, we have something unique popping through the woodwork here. What do we have over here? Well, this is another truck that you would think somebody would buy because of its simplicity, but unfortunately nobody's buying this either because we have a very basic looking Classic, steel rims on there, long box, very basic looking, no rear slider, and actually even inside, look inside there, you have that very basic small screen, like a 4-inch screen. You've got plastic seats, plastic floors. There's even crank windows in this vehicle. Clearly a very simple unit, a great little work trucker for fleet, but even this one's not selling very well. Obviously this one's still sitting on the lot.
The news has been in the works for some time. Jeeps have been struggling.
Jeeps have been one of the worst selling vehicles. They've been heavily incentivized. High price tags. We've seen prices rise on Jeeps up to 50 to 60% in the last 5 years. Means that a lot of people have finally woken up and realized, wait a minute, these vehicles are way too much money, and a lot of people just can't either afford it or don't want to pay that kind of money for a modern day Jeep. It's simply not worth it in a lot of people's opinion. High trim levels as much as $55,000 Canadian. It's no wonder they're not selling.
Slashing prices, trying to cut back, close down plants, chopping workers, closing factories, CEOs even getting pushed out the door. They're trimming down the fat, but don't know if there's enough fat left to go around. It's pretty much as lean as it can get before they're looking down the barrel of what we just spoke of, and that's bankruptcy. So there appears to be 3 major reasons why Stellantis is pricing themselves and moving outside of the swim lanes of success. One, of course, we're talking about they're pricing themselves into a market that's considered luxury, and that's not their swim lane.
There's no amount of money or no amount of convincing that you can tell me that a Jeep like this is actually a luxury vehicle. But that's what Jeep is trying to promote themselves. Rebrand these vehicles like this Wagoneer and the Grand Wagoneers as luxury vehicles. But they're clearly not, and that's another big reason why they're heavily incentivized. Here recently, Jeep has offered up some major incentives and clawbacks on some of the pricing of a lot of these vehicles because they were not selling. The Grand Wagoneers in certain trim levels, you can even get as much as $7,000 or $8,000 off, but that's still not enough for most customers.
Another problem is a lot of their products seem to be obsolete and disconnected from what customers are looking for. Reliability issues, recalls every which way from Sunday.
And now as you see all of this inventory continually rise, we're seeing a lot of these Rams, although they have been heavily incentivized and some of them have been selling. The fact remains is there's still way too many older models, 23s and 24s laying around, and now the 25s are just filling up the lots as they're rolling in off the trucks. So factories had to start scaling back production. In other words, they stopped the manufacturing process for some of their key vehicles, the Wranglers, the Jeep Grand Cherokees, just because the dealers weren't pushing them out to the market quick enough. They had to actually stop production and stop sending vehicles to each individual dealer because they could not sell them.
And as well, the third major reason Stellantis seems to be going down a train that they're failing is that they're trying to advance too quickly to the EV market when the marketplace and the buyers clearly not are asking for those types of products. Look at the North American space. That is one of the biggest, most neglected marketplaces in Stellantis' arsenal, and it shows. And the fifth conversation, the single biggest reason for these extraordinarily high car prices.
You know, it's not solely and exclusively because a lot of times people blame everybody else. Bobblehead 1 says it's their reason, Bobblehead 2 says it's their reason, and everybody's blaming everybody else. But at the end of the day, everybody's trying to grab their piece of the puzzle here, or try their piece of the pie. I mean, during the vid, we know in 2020, everybody says that during that time, that just stirred up the whole market and everything. That in itself is no reason for this to have changed. Yes, there was a halt, there was a big stoppage, there was a huge challenge in the way we did our business, the way we did our work, and it sort of transformed how everything worked for us. You know, now we're buying more things online. It kind of veered everybody away from the idea of going and doing you know, storefront shopping. Brick and mortar started to go away and die. Of course, governments were printing money, so that didn't help with the inflationary costs, but we're seeing people on the streets way more than we ever did before. And a lot of it is mental health, a lot of it is finances, and there's a whole variety of reasons why that is. Everybody points at the OEMs as being greedy, and there was a million reasons, and everybody pointed to somebody else and said, they're the reason, that's the reason, that's the reason. You know what? It's bigger than that.
And unfortunately, we sometimes have to look right internally at ourselves and understand why things are the way they are.
So for the workers, this market needs a correction. A Toyota 4Runner shouldn't start at $41,000 and go up to $55K. That's a normal person SUV. I would agree with that. I mean, that's typical middle class, garden variety. Like I said, I've talked about this Lunchbox Joe. That's the kind of vehicle we should be able to afford, but now a lot of us can't. It's out of our reach. 55 grand is not a normal person price for a car. Per the online affordability calculators, I could afford a $41,000 car on a 4-year loan right there. And if I'm willing to go with $1,000 a month payment, that seems like an insane amount of money to spend on a car. I couldn't agree more. Absolutely, it's bananas. And we see this, how many people are going, you know, repossessed because they've taken on more than they can chew. And I make a very strong salary, easily the top 5% of my very, very, very expensive state. So if you make $200,000 plus and are financially literate in most other ways, apparently you can comfortably buy a base model Toyota 4Runner. Yeah, something wrong in the market, and people need to stop wasting their 401k contributions on overpriced, shitty mid-market cars. 100%. And don't even get me started on the new fad of $100,000 mass market SUVs and trucks. Unless you're a contractor, laborer, and can expense the depreciation on a high trim F-150 type of truck, you're either very, very, very well off, or either just like to pretend to be a blue collar or legitimately need the utility for a truck improvement and have so much cash that 100 grand isn't a big deal. Or you're financial literate, totally irresponsible, and love to exist in debt. And that's what it is. We're seeing this. People are spending $1,000 a month is very common in the States. In Canada, to get into $1,000 a month payment is child's play. That's every day. Almost every vehicle is going to cost you $800, $900. You know, the days of the old $200 a month car payments, those are long gone. That ship sailed many, many moons ago. I know people spending $2,000 a month for a relatively moderate level of luxury vehicle. And even a F-150 or a Ram, people are paying $1,800 a month. So it's beyond me why people get themselves in that predicament. The last thing you want to do is flip these vehicles, you know, every couple of years. So that's the last thing you want to do. If you don't need a new vehicle, buy something like that little Corolla right there, where you can get into something, you know, maybe that's 5-10 years old, that's got a lot of life left in it, and then just drive by that. And it may be worth a little extra money, but as opposed to buying brand new, or do go the furthest extreme like I do, and just continue fixing, you know, these old, worn out. Sure, I don't have the big infotainment screens. Sure, I don't have all of the big stereo system, and I don't have leather interior there. I have a very basic set of controls, but it is power controls. I have power seats. Just keep maintaining and fixing your old stuff as long as you can. Because if you get another 5 or 10 years out of this, that's just one less vehicle that you've injected into that screwball market that we're in right now. So, if I could just say, that's the best solution. Stay out of this stinky market. Don't feed the beast. And as above all, don't reward bad behavior. These dealers, these OEMs that are charging us way, way too much, that's bad behavior. And there's only one way that's going to end up for the dealers and these manufacturers, and it's not looking good for them. And I'll be honest, bailouts are not the way. I think consumers are done with that. We're overpaying on the front end, the back end, in between, and every which way from Sunday. So it's time that needs to stop. Politicians need to look at this and say, you know what, you're on your own. You run a small business, no one's giving you bailouts. It goes under because you didn't know how to manage your business properly. There's no bailouts. Anyway, I hope that helps everybody. Please just say, I didn't mean to tell you so, but I told you so. The buyers are the main problem here. They enabled these dealers.
So while a lot of people like to blame the government, a lot of people like to blame the manufacturers and the dealers and the salespeople, a lot of people even like to blame the banks, and while they're a big part of the problem, the bottom line is, if it weren't for the buyers buying these highly overpriced vehicles, it's all about supply and demand, then these vehicles wouldn't be priced the way they are. And with all of that said, I really hope you enjoyed today's Crusty Car News. Definitely another amazing episode right there in case you've missed it. And you want to check out 6-Speed Car Reviews, my other channel, you're going to want to check it out from somebody who actually cares and speaks candidly about cars. Hope to see each and every one of you on the next one. See you real soon. Bye-bye.